Good morning, church. If you're expecting a preaching sermon, sorry, it's me. It's been a while. I will say Pastor Kojo, who had the video with his wife Liz, our former pastor, who's moved on to the Ohio Conference as evangelistic director, spoke every week. So I kind of got rusty. Didn't get up here much like I had been previously. But my style isn't to just talk to you and you sit there and listen. Mine is more of a teaching. We're going to have interaction. We're going to talk. We're going to ask questions. We're going to, have comments, which is appropriate for what Job is about, because between Job and his three friends, and there's a lot of conversation going. Anyways, let's get started. So we have here Job. I don't know who came up with this drawing, but there it is. And that's from the Hebrew is Eob. And what we find from Job is that we have an unknown author. Some have guessed that it was Moses. It was about the contemporary time of Moses, and we don't know exactly when these events took place. So let's get into it. If you'd like to turn in your Bibles to Job, if you know where Job is, you go to center your Bibles, typically Psalms, and then move back one. So let's turn to Job 1. Going to be a lot of reading. In fact, I don't know if we want to get some microphones and have people read too. Any of the students willing to read some of the scriptures on? Perfect. We'll get some microphones out. Push the button till the green light comes on, and then. So we're at Job 1, verses 1 and 2. Everyone there? Okay, I'll start out. There was a man in the land of Uz. Anybody know where Uz is? That's Oz, not Uz. They think it was near Edom, but they're not really sure. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. Okay, he's the hero of our story. He's the reason this book is here. What's missing from our description here of Job? There's no long genealogies. Typically, when you see like an Old Testament patriarch, they have, what's his name, the son of who, the son of him, the son of that, all the way down the line. What we discover from this with the the Hebrew there is, this is the only place this is found in the Bible. Job was not an Israelite. He was an Arab. He was, we think that only the Israelites followed God and worshiped him and did those things, but no, we find that Job is not an Israelite, but he did worship the Lord. And how do we know that? Because let's keep reading. And the man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. These aren't repeating themselves. They're four different descriptions of who Job is. Anybody have a King James version? What versions do we have here? New King, typically, that's what we're reading, and that's what I've got. Does anybody have an old King James version? Okay, what does the word blameless, how does that come up in the King James? Perfect. Ooh. So if we read the King James, we'll read that there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright. Any perfect people here? What is the context of perfect or blameless in what we're reading here? Perfect isn't mean that he was absolutely sinless or flawless, right? Anybody flawless or sinless here? Anybody never commit sin? No, that's not us. But what perfect entails was that he was mature. In other words, he had developed this relationship with God, and over time, his relationship got better and better and closer and closer. And the idea of perfect, the idea of blameless, is you get to a point where you depend on God so much for everything. And that's where he was. He wasn't perfect in the sense of he never sinned, but he was perfect in heaven's eyes because of his relationship with the Lord. and had 7 sons and 3 daughters were born to him. Anybody want 10 kids? No, okay. What does this tell us about Job? He's probably older, right, to have that many children. Okay, continuing on. Okay, somebody want to read? Raise a hand. I'll just point. We'll start here and we'll work our way through. How's that?
Also, his possessions were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, and a very large household, so that this man was the greatest of all the people of the east.
So what do we know about Job? He's rich. How do we describe wealth when there's no banks, no stock market, no, nothing like that? You describe what he possesses. He's got 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 oxen, 500 donkeys, and a very large household. What is the household? Is this his family? No, they're the servants, right? You have that much livestock. You've got to have people that work the fields and all of that. So by all accounts, Job was a very wealthy man. And in fact, some have considered that maybe Job himself wrote this. But then would you say, and the man was the greatest of all the people in the East? It's a little pat on the back if you're writing it yourself. But no, it was just telling us who he was. And his sons would go and feast in their houses, each to his appointed day, and would send and invite his 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. What do we glean from this? When we read scriptures, we're not supposed to just read it. We're supposed to understand what they're trying to say. They don't all live in Job's house, do they? All the sons had their own houses, and they would go around and feast with each other in each house, and move with them. Okay, so it was when the days of feasting had run their course that Job would send and sanctify them, and he would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them. For Job said, "It may be that my sons have sinned and cursed God in their hearts." Thus Job did regularly. What do we know about Job so far? Not only is he blameless and upright in all of those things, but he also worries about his family. Do you have someone praying for you? Are you praying for someone in your life? Very important. Okay. Now, we have basically this quick prelude of what's going on in Job. It describes where he lives, his name, his character, how many children he has, how wealthy he has, and yet the scene shifts, doesn't it? The accuser, round 1. Who'd like to read? Go ahead.
All of the verses there, 6 and 7.
Yeah, just read all of it.
Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" So Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and walking back and forth on it."
Okay. Where's the setting? We're no longer in Uz. We might be in Oz. So we're no longer in Uz. Where are we? We're assuming heaven. Maybe it wasn't. Is Satan allowed back into heaven at this point? We don't know. But anyways, we have Satan also came among them. Satan came among them, but wasn't a part of them. So we have these representatives that of different worlds that came before God, and Satan's there too. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" Does God not know where Satan was? Sure he does. We just get this prompt, so Satan answered, "From going to and fro on the earth and from walking back and forth on it." What does that imply? What does this going to and fro and walking back and forth on it entail? In the Old Testament, when you read people, when they claim their territory, they walked the perimeter. In other words, where they walked was like, I own this. Ever walk your property? I do a lot behind the mower. But anyways, So Satan's saying, hey, look, I'm down on the earth. It's mine. People worship me down there. I own the earth. I took over. It's no longer yours. Which entails the Lord to reply with this. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil? Have we heard those words before, that description? That's the exact description you read in, what is it, verse 2 or 3? It's the same exact words. Verse 1. Who's reading next? We'll get to you. There's plenty.
So Satan answered, and the Lord said, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land.
Okay, Satan's accusing God of what? Showing preferential treatment to Job. In other words, look at Job. He's the richest in the East, right? He's down there. Well, Satan's saying, you know, the only reason he worships you, the only reason he likes you is because you've got a hedge around him. You're protecting him. You're blessing him. You're doing these things. But now stretch out your hand. This is Satan continuing to talk here. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will surely curse you to your face. What's Satan saying here? Does circumstance depend? Does your relationship with God depend on your circumstance? Satan's saying in Job's case it does. You know, stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and surely he will curse you to your face. In other words, the only reason he's worshiping you, the only reason he has this relationship with you is because of the camels and the donkeys and the servants and the children and all those things. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Wow. What is it? What's going on here? Does Satan have control over Job? Yes, no? See, we're trying to have a discussion here, and there's no... right, and see, okay, because there's a limiting action here. It says, Satan goes to, or Lord says to Satan, all he has is in your power, except what? Do not lay a hand on his person. What's he saying? You know, in other words, you can touch everything around him, but leave Job alone. Satan attacks. When bad things happen to us, do we attribute them to God or to Satan or to... How do we handle adversity in our lives? Who's reading next? Okay.
Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them, when the Sabeans raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you.
Okay, what's happening here? How is Satan attacking? Well, we have the Sabaeans, right? Where's Satan in all this? Can Satan prompt others to attack you? So what did Job lose right here? The oxen, the donkeys, and some of the servants, right? Except for this one guy. You'll see this repeating over and over. This one guy, he escapes and gets in to tell Job what's going on. Next verse, who's got?
While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them. and I alone have escaped to tell you.
Okay, while he was still speaking, how immediate is that? So what happened? What came down from heaven? Nobody said the fire of God. It's right there on the screen. Do we attribute to God things that Satan does? You know, if you've got insurance, right, on your house or whatever, and you know, catch something fire in the in the kitchen or whatever, and insurance will cover that. But unless you're really covered, ever hear the term act of God? In other words, if a tornado comes and takes your whole house away, the insurance goes, that was an act of God. We can't cover that. An act of God. So the fire of God took away the sheep and more servants. Okay, so the first one were the Sabaeans, right? The second one is a fire. Let's read the third one. Next. Anyone? Go ahead.
While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels and took them away. Yes, and killed the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you.
Okay, now the Chaldeans come in and do what? The camels and the servants are right. So what does Job have left from livestock? Nothing. What does he have left in servants? Nothing. What does he have left? His children, his family, right? Well, that doesn't take long until, while he was still speaking, another came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the oldest brother's house. And suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. What's the worst day in your life? Not that bad. One thing after another. First, all his possessions, his servants, and then his children. How would you be able to handle this? This is what Job does. That Job arose, tore his robe, and shaved his head. I must be in mourning. And he fell to the ground and worshiped. What did he do? He worshiped. Is this a strange reaction? Maybe to us, but not to Job, right? He developed that relationship. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In other words, those were just things, right? I mean, his children, very devastating to lose a child. But he says, the Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Is the concept of Satan known in the Old Testament? I mean, we understand it because we can go, like our memory verse or scripture reading said, we're to look back on the things that were written before for our understanding. I don't know if they really understood that good things were from God and bad things were from Satan. Just everything good or bad. And we have to also tie that in with the fact that God is limiting Satan's power here, right? So, I mean, when bad things happen to us, God is allowing those things in our lives. All this Job did, in all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. What's going on here? He's maintaining his perfect, blameless character, isn't he? What was Satan's accusation? Take away his stuff and he will curse you, right? Here's Job. Did God know this was going to happen? Absolutely. God knows everything. He had such confidence in Job that he knew this was going to be the outcome. And all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Okay, accuser round 2. So we move from the prologue. In other words, we learn about Job and his wealth and his family, and then we move up to wherever God and the sons of God and Satan gather together. And Then we have the calamities which befall Job, and now we're back to this. Who wants to read again?
Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said to Satan, "From where do you come?" Satan answered the Lord and said, "From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it."
Okay. Does this sound familiar? 2 verse 1 is the same as 1 verse 6, except for the word again. Again is beginning. And then verse 2 is the same as Job 1:7. So what's going on? This is Satan going back to the Lord, and the Lord's asking, where you been? And then verse 3. Then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, one who hears God and shuns evil?" Does this sound familiar? It should. We just read that in chapter 1. And still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without cause. This is added. What is God saying to Satan? And still he holds fast to his integrity. Isn't this, wouldn't it be great if God could say that about each and every one of us? That we held fast to our integrity no matter what happened? So we don't let circumstance control your relationship with God. So how does Satan respond to this? Satan answered in the Lord and said, "Skin for skin." What does that mean? There's been a lot of guesses over the years, but it's basically, I don't know. What was? Because, I think it kind of continues here in the second part of verse 4. Yes, all that a man has, he will give for his life. In other words, possessions are one thing, children are one thing, but attack them directly. How many have great health? How many have okay health? You're young, one of these days, your knees will give out and all kinds of things like that. Ask us old people, right? Verse 5, "But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will surely curse you to your face." What's Satan saying here? Possessions, children, one thing. Let me afflict Job directly, and we'll see how far it gets. And the Lord said to Satan, "Behold, he is in your hand, but spare his life." Again, God limits Satan's power, right? So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. Anybody have a boil? Anybody have any skin conditions? Anybody have anything this bad? How bad was it? Who'd like to read?
And he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. Then his wife said to him, "Do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die."
Wow. Well, she looked at the situation and she'd given up, hadn't she? At a certain point, wouldn't death actually be preferential to scraping your boils off with broken pottery? Where is he sitting? He's sitting in ashes. What does that imply? It gotten so bad with not only all his wealth is gone, not only his children is gone, now his health is now gone. He's sitting in the ash pile just waiting to die and turn to ashes himself, right? Well, that's true. Yeah, we hadn't thought about her reaction to all of this. Very good. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speak. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. What's he saying here? Take the good with the bad. I think we can all say that when things are good. When things start going bad, it's kind of tentative. But this was a very bad day. What was Satan's first accusation? That Job only worships you, Lord, because of all the stuff you've given him. Satan was allowed to take that away. Satan comes back and goes, well, the only reason he still worships you, even though I've taken all his stuff away, is because of his health. Take that away, and he will surely curse you. So he's allowed to give Job head-to-toe boils. What's Job's response? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. The three friends. Have we all got friends that are real close to us? That would stick with us through thick and thin? Job 2:11. Now when Job's three friends heard that all this adversity had come upon him, each one came from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, there's that short guy, and Zophar the Naamathite. For they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. Fantastic, right? Nothing like having some good friends to come comfort you when things aren't exactly perfect in your life. How do you like this picture? I don't know if this is AI or what, but look at, they're sitting on these nice sculpted little stools here, and they're all well, I saw this picture and I go, yeah, I just wanted to, do we sugarcoat things sometimes? Seriously, when a friend's going through something, we tend to sugarcoat it, or do we tell people the truth? So here comes the three friends. There's actually four. We'll get into that later. And when they raised their eyes from afar and did not recognize him, they lifted their voices and wept. And each one tore his robe and sprinkled dust on his head towards heaven. Ever go to comfort a friend's house and they're in such bad shape, you don't know what to say, you don't know what to do, you're just in shock and awe of what's going on? So they sat down with him on the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and no one spoke a word to him, for they saw his grief was very great, Job 2:13. What's going on here? This is what's going on here. Can you imagine being in such rough shape? You're at a loss for words. You're there to comfort him. You're there to go to support him. And you're just blown away by how bad it really is. So they sat with him a whole week, saying nothing. We're going to be... So after this, and this is going to be a two-parter. Next week we're going to wrap this up. But I wanted to show you this first, because it goes like this. Now the three friends have 3 rounds where, Job says something, a friend responds, Job says something, another friend responds, Job says something, and then back and forth. Job's basic premise is, I'm blameless. And if I'm blameless, my suffering is not divine justice. His conclusions are either God doesn't run the world according to justice, or that God is unjust. Now, where would Old Testament people get their idea of good and bad, blessings and cursings? Ever read Deuteronomy 28? If you want to read that, for an afternoon, it's kind of It's very thick, very hard to get through. So in other words, here's Job's premise. I'm blameless. Doesn't the scriptures tell us that he's blameless? It does. But he's going through this suffering. He doesn't understand that. He goes, my suffering is not divine justice. In other words, the idea of the time was that if you were suffering, you were being punished for something you did. You were a sinner. There's some, it's obvious to everyone else that you're being punished. If you're blessed, you're on God's good side. You're doing all right. So there's this idea of blessings and punishment. But he's saying, there's nothing in that I've searched my character. There's nothing I've seen that would draw me to this amount of give me a word here, people. Suffering, this amount of suffering. So are his conclusions correct? Does God run the world according to justice? It's a trick question. Does he? Okay, so we have people that believe that God, and we'll get into this. If you're looking for a reason why there's suffering in this world, and if you go to Job, you're not going to find an answer. It isn't in there. The question is that Job says, hey, why is this going on to me? He's questioning his friends. He's questioning God himself. He would like to have a face-to-face meeting with God. You ever been that worked up in your life where you want to have God, why are you doing this to me? This is Job. He goes, I don't know why this is happening. So his conclusions are either God doesn't run the world according to justice, or that God is unjust, one or the other. And we'll pick this up next week. Yeah.